Welcome to the messy middle of entrepreneurship, unfiltered and unapologetic. Uncensored Entrepreneurs, hosted by Star Cod, Robert Wall, and Tina Torres Wilson, brings you real stories from the trenches of building a business. Those late nights, hard lessons, big wins, and everything in between. This is where the truth about entrepreneurship lives. No fluff, no filters, just raw, honest conversations with founders who have lived it. So, if you're over the highlight reel and you're ready for the real deal, hit play. Most entrepreneurs are focused on making more money, but almost no one stops to ask much harder questions like, how much money is actually enough? Not just to survive, but to live well, to step back, to make choices without pressure. Today's guest, Nicole Meihofer, helps people get clear on that. She's a wealth strategist who works with women, entrepreneurs, and people nearing retirement to turn their investments into income so their money actually supports the life they want to live now. This isn't just about building wealth, it's about knowing what you're building it for and having a plan that lets you use it. Now, before we jump into today's conversation, I do want to let you know that Nicole Meihofer is an investment professional registered with IHT Wealth LLC, a registered investment advisor with the SEC. The opinions expressed are solely those of the author and do not represent those of IHT Wealth LLC or any of its affiliates and is for informational purposes only. Nicole, welcome to Uncensored.
It's great to meet you, Robert and Star. Thanks for having me.
We're excited to have you on the show today, Nicole. Money is one of my favorite topics. So, whenever we have guests on about that topic, our audience is lit. So, we really want to find out more about your background and how you got started. So, I know you're into financial advising and wealth strategy specifically. What led you into this space? Tell us about your background and how you got started.
My career began in the private banking and investment group at Merrill Lynch, where I was surrounded by families in extraordinary wealth. Founders who'd sold their businesses for nine figures, families living off generational wealth, really created by their parents, grandparents, and sometimes even great grandparents, and executives making seven figures a year. But here's what I noticed. My business partner and I at the time looked around and realized we didn't see many people who looked like us being invited into that world. So we thought, why shouldn't this level of planning be available to more people? So that's when we decided to leave Merrill Lynch and we started building our business in 2018, and one that took that high net worth experience and made it really accessible and inclusive with the freedom to democratize access to investments, sophisticated planning, those things that really are gate kept by some of the big broker dealer or the big investment firms. They make it seem big and scary and unattainable, but really everybody should have access to that no matter what your wealth level. So I spent years growing that firm as the financial advisor and the chief operating officer. And this is where business ownership comes into play, as a minority equity owner and no material voting rights, I really had no control over its future. And although my business partner and we had a good relationship, when it came down to it on paper, I wasn't the decision maker. Additionally, in 2023, my son was born and he suffered a massive stroke at birth. He's doing incredible, which is mind blowing and such a gift, but I had to help him recover. And I changed a lot during that time. And I was continuing to grow our business we had built together. But my business partner and we really started diverging from our vision and our mission. And although breaking up with my business partner was very emotionally intense, we're still great friends, which I'm grateful for. But when I decided to exit, that also meant that I could reclaim 100% equity ownership and really control of the direction of the business. And that led me to launch Pearl Vest Capital in April 2025, really 1 year ago yesterday. So now I have complete control of my practice and I'm continuing the mission I started with my old business partner. We do comprehensive wealth management, financial planning, investment management, tax efficient strategies, legacy, inheritance planning, risk management, cash flow optimization. And I really structure my practice as an outsourced family office style. So I offer those types of services to my clients, whether or not they have family office assets.
That's amazing. So, first of all, congratulations on the anniversary, by the way. That's quite a milestone. Many entrepreneurs don't make it even past that first year, right? And so we'll circle back around with you the 3-year mark, but I know that you're gonna do fantastic.
I was lucky enough though that I already had a practice. It was more of a restructuring. So I had my practice established. I just separated and took my clients with me.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things I didn't even have the opportunity to disclose to you yet is way back in the day, in a previous life, I had my Series 7 and 66, and I did a ton of things in that sector. Most of it was full financial planning, and this is what I'm curious about. So way back then, it was a brand new approach where my firm started to move out of just the number crunching and really tapping into that emotional based financial planning. Just really understanding the dynamic behind why. And I know we're going to be talking a great deal about what is enough and how to define that and all the things that go into that. What was one pivotal moment for you in your career when it wasn't just about the numbers anymore, right? It started becoming more and more about the people and how they relate to money and that journey. Just share with us a little bit about that transition as well.
Yeah, there were two pivotal moments. The first is deeply personal. My mom passed away when she was 57 years old, right on the cusp of retirement for her and my dad. And my dad worked so hard his entire life. I mean, saved in his 401k. He's the reason why I'm in wealth management and why I was even interested in it in the first place. And I saw them planning this dream trip to Italy that they never got to take. And so I saw these incredible dreams and this decades of hard work completely shift what the future looked like for my dad. And that shift how I looked at wealth management. And I realized that it's not just about this intense drive to save and acquire assets so that you can retire one day and take the dream trips. It's about really creating that life for yourself today and making sure that you're living and creating meaning for yourself now, with the goal also of not forgetting about retirement, because for most people that does come. And then the second one was becoming an entrepreneur. When I was at Merrill Lynch, it was really about the numbers, and I would say we were in the same position, just starting to dive into more next generation planning and more emotional aspects of what financial planning is, but was still very much about the investments and the numbers. And then becoming an entrepreneur and having the freedom to work with anybody that I wanted to, regardless of their asset level or their background, it really opened up my eyes to that people need that emotional connection and they need somebody to listen to who they really are and what they really want, as opposed to just fitting their financial lives into a number and a formula system that the financial industry meets. And I started working with very interesting clients, exonerees, so individuals who had been wrongly convicted of crimes and then were found innocent. And then they won multi-million dollar settlements from the government because they were incarcerated and they were innocent. And so that was so much more about the emotional aspect than the money. And they taught me so much about what it means to want to and have this desire to live a fulfilling life because they were robbed of it for years, sometimes decades.
Wow. That is really amazing that you're able to tap into people who've gone through so much trauma and have to reposition themselves financially. And now they have all this wealth, and what are they going to do with it after being locked away? That's crazy. So that's one segment that you focus on. Are there other types of people that you currently work with outside of those who've been incarcerated and won major lawsuits?
Yeah, so I work with a variety of different clients, entrepreneurs who are profitable, who want to save for retirement and start building their personal business outside of the equity within their own business. And then individuals who have inherited money, small to large amounts, depending on the type of inheritance it is. Sometimes it's parents passing away, sometimes it's grandparents or a random aunt and uncle who, surprise, leaves you a nice inheritance. I also work with a lot of divorced women who are either receiving large settlements or are now separating from their husband and need to pay out settlements to their husbands. And that's a very difficult and fulfilling job because it's emotional. I don't know if whoever's listening has gone through divorce knows what I'm talking about. And it could be scary on both ends, whether or not you're giving assets away or you are receiving the assets, then you have to live on them. I work with a lot of clients in that position.
I love that. It's not just transactional. I mean, it really sounds like you're guiding them on this journey, right? Because most people that accumulate wealth over a large period of time, they grow into the aspect of education, right? They understand what it's like to allocate their funds and certain things to protect those funds. But when someone inherits something, as you've stated, in many different ways, it's an immediate life change. And unfortunately, without proper guidance, too often people splurge and spend all of that money, right? Or they get overtaxed and they don't even realize what they had to begin with.
Or they don't know how much they need to live off of or what this money will provide for them.
So you talk about how much money is enough money. And I love the fact that you support people who maybe they've received small amounts, but also large amounts. How do people really know how much is enough money? Can we dive into that topic?
Yes. So I'd love to ask your audience and you something. What does enough look like for you? Not for your parents, not for your friends, but for you individually. Because in my experience, most people have never really answered that question honestly. They're chasing a number they inherited from someone else's definition of success. And that's when the whole thing starts to fall apart. So, real wealth building and fulfillment starts with answering that question, not a formula, not a rule, not what worked for the person sitting next to you. And I've seen this time and time again with my clients. Every single client is different and have different goals. Some people don't care much about where they live. What lights them up is that freedom, the ability to hop on a plane and go wherever, whenever. For them, enough might mean a modest home and a very healthy travel budget. They may even be willing to live on less if it means getting to financial independence sooner. For someone else, it might look completely different. It's waking up every morning in a beautiful big home surrounded by beautiful things, maybe a family, and they're okay with that, meaning they work a little longer to fund their spending today with the goal of saving enough to continue funding that lifestyle well into retirement, which means they might need to retire a little bit later. Neither is right or wrong, but they require completely different numbers, different strategies, and different plans for each person. And this is where we can start to answer questions. The two most important numbers to help you determine what is enough for you. And I believe every person needs to know the answer to these questions. And most people, in my experience, have never sat down to figure either one out. The first one is, how much do you need every month to truly live and thrive, not just survive and pay the bills and go to the grocery store and eat, but to actually live the life you want. That includes travel, the dinners, the experiences, the things that really make your life feel full. The second number is, how much do you need invested so that those investments eventually generate enough income to fund that life?
I hope you're enjoying this conversation. Before we continue, one thing I hear all the time, especially in the early stages of building a business, is how exhausting it is trying to manage everything on your own. I remember feeling like I had a dozen tabs open in my brain at all times. That's exactly what inspired me to create She Has Clients, an all-in-one sales and marketing platform for entrepreneurs who want to grow their business without patching together a million tools. If that sounds like what you need, you can learn more at shehasclients.com. Now let's get back to the conversation.
And that's your financial independence number, the point where your money is working for you instead of the other way around. I'm currently working with a client who's going through a divorce in her early 70s. She's starting a new chapter, and her primary need is income from the settlement she's receiving from her husband to fund her life right now. So, we're building an income focused investment portfolio designed around her immediate needs while keeping an eye on her long term goals as well. So, the complete opposite end of that spectrum is I'm also working with a couple, both entrepreneurs, young kids at home, growing their businesses while trying to plan for retirement at the same time. And their financial plan has a lot more moving parts, especially both being business owners. So, we looked at what they need to be setting aside each month to get there. And then we're intentional about the right accounts to use. Things like a solo 401k and an HSA, structures that create tax advantages today while building towards the future. But we're answering the same question: how much is enough to live off of? For the client that's getting divorced, that's today. How much do we need today with our investment portfolio to fund our lifestyle? For the entrepreneur clients, that's how much do we need to be saving so tomorrow and in retirement, we have the investments we need to fund our lifestyle. That answers the second question for both of them. The first question is the same. What do we need to live our life today and feel fulfilled?
Wow. What a topic. Just that in itself is like opening up so much that we could sit here for hours, quite honestly. And no matter how prepared we think we are, just you bringing that up in conversation, by the way, it excites me. A little bit of cringe in there as well, because then you start to reflect when you finally come to the realization that this is something that we all face in life. Have we answered that question? And do we continue to answer the question? That's the biggest thing, right? Because when you were first saying that, I was thinking to myself, do you remember when you were maybe just out of high school going into college and you thought potential, well, maybe not for you, but way back in my dinosaur era, when my father was making six figures as an executive, I thought to myself, if I could ever make $100,000, then I will be so rich. And then as life keeps happening, you realize, oh, that really isn't much anymore, right? And everything keeps changing. So even what my goals and ambitions were 30 years ago are totally different than what they are today. And so I love the fact that that keeps evolving. And this is a question that quite honestly, we should ask ourselves, as simple as that is, we should ask ourselves this annually. There's even a shift in lifestyle, and what mattered to me 5 years ago is totally different than what matters to me today. And so I would imagine you get that a lot as well, right? With some of your clients over the years.
Yeah, Robert, I could tell that you have a background in wealth management and financial planning because we're on the same wavelength. And what you just said was exactly what I was thinking because it does change. I'd love to get personal for a second because I'm a storyteller and I believe people learn by hearing stories. It does change. And when I'm having this conversation with clients, they get clammed up over the fact that they have to make these decisions and they think that their money's going into retirement account jail. They can never have access to it ever again when they put it into a retirement account, or they're going to create this plan. And in 30 years, they better be sticking to that plan or else they're in trouble. And that's just not the case because it does change, it evolves. Life is living and breathing. If you looked at my financial plan 5 years ago, and I love this example, you would have seen me investing in custodial investment accounts for my kids, savings accounts, 529s, the whole setup. If I could invest in an account for my kid, I would, because my mindset at the time was simple. I want to set my kids up financially because who knows what the future holds. So let's build this up so they never have to be worried about money. Today, 5 years later, my thinking is completely different. I've actually decided to spend down some of those custodial accounts because I don't want my kids to have unfettered access to a lump sum of money at a young age. So I shifted. And if you go on Instagram, you'll see a lot of ex financial advisors or people who were used to be in the financial industry giving advice to invest in Trump accounts or invest in these custodial accounts without any context or any planning beside it. And it's a little dangerous to look at that and not have context around it. So I shifted that line item entirely that used to say allocate to kids' investment accounts. Now it says travel and experience fund because my goal isn't to hand them wealth someday, it's to help them become wealth creators themselves. I've become obsessed with how to create kids that know how to create wealth. My kids are 3 and 6, so we have a long time to figure it out if I'm doing it right, but I'm on the journey, so we can circle back and talk about it in the future. It has honestly shifted how I show up in my daily life too, because 5 years ago, I was just so worried about the dollar amounts in their accounts, and now I'm worried about spending time with them, and I'm so much more present with them because I'm focused on how can I make sure not to mess this up and help them be the best version of self, help them be happy, which is help them give the tools that they need to learn how to build wealth themselves. And so, even too, on the business side, I used to think I would love to build a business and have my kids take over my wealth management practice one day. I mean, I was so gung ho about that. And now I'm like, I don't think I want that. I want to have them find their own passion, build their own business. I want to sell my practice in 20, 30 years and be able to help them in their businesses. I may change my mind in 5 years. They may become interested in wealth management and investing. And now here we are back to maybe my kids come work in my business. But man, it doesn't matter. What's important to you at 35 may look nothing like what matters to you at 45, 55, 75, 80. And that's not the failure of planning, that's just being human. And that's why, to your point, Robert, I sit down with clients at least annually to do a deep dive into their comprehensive financial plan and make sure we're on the right path.
Yeah, because I mean, just this topic, right? Just having you on our show, I'm immediately going, yeah, it's been a while, right? It's probably been at least 18 to 24 months before I've actually done that. And things have changed. I love that you brought up 529 plans because we used to always joke about the fact that that was basically, was it Harley or Harvard, right? Giving them the ability at some point in their life to decide, I'm going to Harvard or I'm cashing out and I'm buy a Harley, and giving them the ability, the tools more than anything, the mindset, the tools, the ability to navigate these storms in the future when unfortunately we're no longer here to guide them. That is so critical. And I love that.
Yes. Thanks so much for sharing that, Nicole. I mean, you never know. Your kids may definitely be interested, but I love the fact that you're giving them the space to go into what their passions are. And let's talk a little bit more about that wealth building concept. So, a lot of people are definitely focused on wealth building, just as you described, but they're not necessarily using it. So, what's the difference between accumulating a specific amount of money and actually creating income from it?
Yeah. So when you're accumulating money, you're working either in your business or in your job. And a portion of that goes towards funding your lifestyle, your living expenses, your lifestyle expenses. And then a portion of that goes towards your future income needs. And a lot of investors utilize investments to create that future income need. And so that's the accumulation phase. And before I go into the black and white, I'm going to pull back a second because there's a lot of people in different circumstances. So for some people, that accumulation phase is 30, 40 years. For some people, either they sell their business and they have a windfall, they receive an inheritance, or they want to live off their investments earlier than later. So they're just going to grind in their 20s and 30s and then retire when they're 40. So that timeline looks different. So when you're in the spending phase, that's the period of time when your investments need to support you. So you go from taking your income to pulling income from your investments. And depending on your goals and your time horizons, the type of investments that you'll have to create that income will change. I love this conversation of turning your investments into income. There's really a few ways to do that. So you have investing, and we're not talking just about investing in the stock market and hopefully earning money and dividends on your stock, but that could be investing in something like a bond or a money market mutual fund if you need a little bit extra income. There's real estate. You can invest in real estate and receive income every month from your rental income or a real estate investment trust. There's a lot of different types of investments. If you pull back, a lot of times I hear investors recently say, well, I want to invest in real estate because I want passive income. But what is passive income? And what are your goals that you're trying to solve for? So when you get to that phase where you start spending your money, your investments need to support your goals. And you can pull income from your portfolio in a few different ways. You could have investments that provide you income. So like your real estate investments, dividends from stocks pay you income. Your interest from a money market mutual fund or your savings account provide you income. In addition, if you have a portfolio, let's say, of stocks, you also may be selling them periodically and methodically to pull out some of those long-term capital gains if you have them. So it's a strategy and it's a formula that's unique to you. And I can go into more detail in any of those areas. I'm hesitant to get real granular about it. When it comes to forming your own, pulling income out of your portfolio, I think that's something that is mystical to people sometimes.
And it makes so much sense because most people have this ideology that I need $1 million to retire. And they assume that it's a million down to zero. And I think you alluded to that earlier. But yet that money continues to work for you. So it's also accumulating more wealth over a period of time. And so it isn't just this dead certain, you have 10 years to live on this money. I like that. And it's so important to build a strategy around that. One of the things I do want to touch base on, because obviously everything that you're putting out there and everything that you offer, it really is so much value to just about every listener we have. I want to mention though that when it comes to entrepreneurs, there's so many that will cash out their 401ks. They'll just go all in because a true entrepreneur knows it's taking those big risks. And I know this, by the way, because I'm waving my hand and I'm pointing at myself back here, that throughout the years, I've taken major risks and done, quite honestly, very ignorant things with my money because I would invest in things that I thought were going to pay huge dividends in the future. I would imagine when you talk to entrepreneurs, you see a lot of this as well. So, how do you navigate that conversation and work with someone that typically thinks their greatest asset is obviously their business or their dream or their vision, and they're putting all of their eggs in that basket?
A lot of times, that is their biggest and best investment. They're investing in themselves, but they can't forget that they could be running two businesses. They could be running their business, building equity in their business, creating a active income stream, which is the profits that they're drawing from their business. But then what happens to that cash, that excess cash that's either just sitting in your business because it makes you feel good, but it's not really doing anything, that could be pulled out, or the cash you're pulling out on a monthly, quarterly, yearly basis, that could be going to funding and building your second passive investment or passive business, investments that you don't have to really work for. I mean, unless you're owning real estate and you have tenants, then that's a little bit more active. But if you're investing in the stock market or you're investing in some fixed income investments or some other types of investments, like let's say cryptocurrency, those things, the goal is for those to grow over the long term and help build wealth and create more income for you over time. And you don't really have to work for that. All you have to do is build your business, work within your business, make sure that's profitable, create your cash flow there. So I say you need to look at your business as your biggest investment. And when you're looking at your overall asset allocation too, you want to be diversified. If you're invested in your business, bring that into your asset allocation when you're looking at your overall allocation. What percentage of that is your total wealth in the beginning years? That's going to be sometimes all of your wealth, everything you have. But the idea and the goal is over time to diversify away from your business and create that second passive income generating business, which is your investment portfolio, and have that grow. Because I've seen this happen. I have a friend whose father owned a multi million dollar company, and her whole life she was told that she was going to inherit a massive amount of money. She was planning on that. And COVID happened. And what was a multi-million dollar exit turned out to be still a large exit, but not enough money nearly to live off of and retire on. And so what happened in that case was the family wasn't saving and investing outside of the business. And I'm not saying the family, but the certain people weren't. What happened was now later in life, they have to start over and learn how to now create income. And they're starting that accumulation phase much later in life. So I'm all about taking risk. Listen, if entrepreneur comes to me, I mean, truly, maybe there's financial advisors out there that would very highly disagree with me. But if you have a passion for something and you have some evidence that it's going to work, I mean, as an entrepreneur, I think there is some rhetoric out there that's a little dangerous that you could just magically come up with an idea and you can start a business and be a millionaire in 5 years. It's really hard.
Nothing is as easy as they advertise.
Yeah, exactly. For some people, maybe it does. But for most entrepreneurs, they're grinding for years, sometimes a decade or so before they start to actually make meaningful money. But at the same time, it's like if that's going to bring you joy in life and make you fulfilled, and you have access to a retirement account, that's a decision you need to make. That will definitely get in the way of your retirement, your long term retirement, if that's your goal. But if you're willing to take the risk and you feel good about that risk, then that's a decision you need to make. So I'm never going to tell an entrepreneur, don't touch your 401k, don't touch your retirement account. I'm not your guru, I'm your guide. But also, you need to know, you need to work out the numbers and really understand what is enough. And I think doing a financial plan before you get into business would actually be a really incredible tool for you to help make better decisions along the road. I wish every high school would make our kids do a financial plan, and I wish every college would make them do a second financial plan before they get into the real world.
Oh man, that's it right there. I mean, I'm all about risk, but you're absolutely right. In those early stages, if most of us were equipped with just a little bit more information and education around this, then you're right. Even with risk, you would understand what that exit looks like, both positive and negative, right?
So true. I just had a conversation with a client, Nicole, and she asked me, Star, I have some additional money and she wanted to look at investing into starting another business opportunity. And I directed her exactly like you said. You're already running this business. Let's expand on that. Why don't you start looking at making some more investments into your future? And she was like, I didn't even think about that. So you're absolutely right.
Yeah, that was
Now
great
you have a
advice.
great name to attach her to, Stars. See?
We just talked about that. So earlier on, you mentioned two big numbers that we should know and understand. So, what systems can people put in place, specifically entrepreneurs, so that they can start making better financial decisions and creating this roadmap that you've described?
Well, the first thing is create a financial plan. And not only a financial plan, a comprehensive financial plan. And what's the difference? So let's say you go talk to an advisor and they say, we're going to do a financial plan for you. We want to know how much you need to retire and what your living expenses are. And we're going to help you figure out how much you need to save and invest. That's just financial planning light. A comprehensive financial plan is going to start with, let's look at your budget. Let's look at your lifestyle expenses. How much do you need? Do you have standard operating procedures for your personal finances in place? We love standard operating procedures for our businesses. So why don't we have them in our personal life? And putting together a financial plan and starting with, let's just start with the goals. What do you want out of life? Let's not even worry about the numbers. I guess I could take you through how I go about financial planning. So let's say one of your listeners is talking to an advisor, they'll know what to look for and what to ask when they're talking to their advisor and how to determine the difference between a comprehensive financial plan and just financial planning light. So for me, we start with goals. I want to know what your non-negotiable goals are. Things like travel, health and fitness, spending, or saving on your kids' education. And then we move to big aspirational goals, buying a vacation home, funding a business, leaving a legacy. Woven through all of it is your monthly lifestyle spending. So your groceries, your mortgages, your rent, gas, utilities, the real cost of your life. And that is where we come up with that first number, what you need to live your life, to reach your non negotiable goals. Let's include your aspirational goals and your monthly lifestyle spending. And we'll know, okay, here's your number. This is what you need to live a meaningful life that you feel good about. Sometimes you may be making enough money, your investments may be supporting your lifestyle in a way that you are bringing in enough income to reach that number. Maybe you're not. And then that's what financial planning will help you figure out what you need to do. Maybe there's areas where you genuinely could spend less. You realize you don't need to spend an extra $1,000 a month at restaurants or spend $25,000 a month traveling. And you could probably spend $20,000 a month and save that extra $5,000 every month. So those are the questions you can start answering and decisions you can start making based on real data. So once we have that all mapped out, we also look at financial organization. So you know your number, but are your systems working? Are you frantically thinking about every month? Okay, I know I have income coming in and I have expenses being paid out, but I don't have a system in place. For example, a standard operating procedure for your personal finances could be the day before the first of the month, I look to make sure that I have enough money in all my accounts so that when things start coming out on the first, your expenses are being paid. Or you sit down with your spouse on the first day of the month and you look at your expenses for the previous month and you determine, are we on track or do we need to make adjustments? In those cases, you're spending 1 hour, 1 day a month looking at this stuff instead of thinking about it every day, every week, or multiple times a day. You have a system in place and you know that's non-negotiable. You sit down once a month and you look at these items.
I absolutely love that because this is a topic that many people they want to tune out of because the realization of maybe where they're at in some of their goals or the timeline of achieving those things, it hurts a little bit, right? But I love that you've broken this down into that one little metric of 1 hour a month. This isn't something that because it feels overwhelming when you think of your finances and your future. But starting with just that 1 hour of conversation and looking at where we're at so that you have the ability to pivot and adjust or maybe take on some more income or maybe the 10-day trip turns into a 5-day trip, right? Whatever that is, I love that you talk about just having those little conversations on the front end.
And having them documented and written down. We have standard operating procedures in our business that we can reference. So create a document and name it your personal financial standing operating procedure document and hold yourself accountable. It's something that I do with my clients. We create personal standard operating procedures for their cash flow and for entrepreneurs too. That has a lot to do with what does your cash flow look like when you're working in your business and getting that out? I can say this over 90% of the time, entrepreneurs that I work with, they don't have a partner, an accountant that's helping them think strategically about what their business to personal cash flow should look like. And that's where having a system in place will help you make the most of that excess cash you have generated so that you can then invest more and start working towards building that second business. So once we have your personal standard operating procedures, we know what your monthly lifestyle spending need is. We have that first question answered. Then we move to question two. What does your investment portfolio need to look like so that it generates enough income to sustain all of this and with the goal of keep growing when you're ready to live off of it? And we can answer this with data because we've done the work. So when I do financial planning, we do that first phase, and then we take all of your investments that you currently have. I use financial planning software that has fancy algorithms to help us look at historical performance data. Robert, you probably know what I'm talking about. And we take all of your important data and put it into the system. Now, we can run these projections, but we're only going to get a good output if we have good data in. And that's where all the work before that comes from. So the numbers, and when we get to the point where we're entering the data in to really run projections to see if what you're currently saving and investing, what you currently own and have, and what you need in the future, if all of that is going to be enough to let you live your life today and also provide for your income and your lifestyle and retirement without you running out of money. Now, financial planning is not black and white art. We can't tell you, yes, you're going to be okay, but it's something that you can lean on to know whether or not you're on the right path. If we look at your financial plan and we have a degree of certainty that you're on the right path, then you could go into your life and your business and you can show up because you know that as of today, you have enough to reach your goals. Or in my experience, even if we do this exercise and I do a financial plan for client and it turns out that they don't have enough or they're not on the right path, there's still this relief and this excitement because they have the data.
It gives them an initial roadmap. Although, as we talked about it earlier, it may pivot and change year after year, but just having that does create some, I'm not going to say certainty, but definitely a little bit of just comfort level.
Power to make adjustments as needed, as you mentioned earlier, when you have that information. So I love that. And I love how you talked about these standard operating procedures for our finances because as business owners, we love talking about SOPs on this show and organization and systems. So that definitely resonates with us. I like how you're tying life and business together and this talk about enough money. That was such an important topic for our audience. So our audience is interested in connecting with you, Nicole. Where can they find you and connect with you?
Yeah. They can go to Pearlvest, PEARLVEST.com, and they can send me a note to connect through the contact page. And also, the place that I show up consistently and provide value is my newsletter. I send it out once a month. I'm a fan of long form content because I feel like, especially with wealth management, you have to have some more context with a lot of the information. So I'll touch on current events, but also some larger, more sophisticated planning items.
Fantastic. And that newsletter you said is right in your website, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Aside from that, do you have any regular events or anything else coming up in the near future that people can be a part of, or maybe take some of those first steps in really connecting with you and your community outside of the newsletter?
Yeah, so I am in Chicago and I do a lot of networking in Chicago and have a huge network here and am always love to meet new people, whether that's virtually or in the city of Chicago. So if you're somebody in Chicago who wants to get more active and be out there, reach out to me. We can connect.
Fantastic. Well, I truly appreciate you being on our show today. And again, this is one of those topics, as you just stated, long form content. It really should be a 4 or 5 hour, webinar, quite frankly, as it's a deep topic with many different facets and moving pieces. But I love the fact that you touched base on so many things that, again, are very deep, they're personal. There's a lot to take on if someone's just starting to think about this, but it doesn't have to be overwhelming, right? Working with someone like you, reaching out to you, getting some of the tips that you're already providing within your community or on great podcasts is a great first step. So I really appreciate you being on the show today. Look forward to catching up with you in the future. And I love that idea around your newsletter. So I'll definitely be connecting with you. I know some resources will be attached to all of our syndicated podcasts that people can connect with you on LinkedIn, pearlvest.com. Thank you again so much for being on the show today. You definitely gave us a lot of things to think about. So I appreciate that.
Thank you for having me. It's been a great conversation.
Thanks for listening to the Uncensored Entrepreneurs. If you're getting value from the show, take a minute to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you tune in. It helps more bold entrepreneurs find us. Until next time, keep showing up, uncensored and unapologetic. And we'll catch you on the next episode.